Another useful API you need to know about is the Stylesheet API. You have seen this before. With this, we can define styles. But let me clarify a few things about styles in a React Native app. First of all, as I said before, these styles we have here, they are not CSS. Their names are inspired by CSS, but they are not CSS. These are just regular JavaScript properties. So when we build our app, React Native will map these platform agnostic components to their native equivalent, and then it will apply these properties on them, okay? So that means this object that we're passing here is essentially a plain JavaScript object. So instead of referencing this object, styles.container, we can pass an inline object here and set the background color to, let's say, orange. Now, look, we have this orange bar on the top because we're applying a single style. We're only setting the background color, okay? We can also define this object somewhere else. For example, I can cut this from here. Let's define a constant called container style and set it to this object. Now we can reference this object over here, container style. Our app still works. Now, previously we were using styles.container. Styles is the object that we're defining over here. So when we call stylesheet.create, we pass an object. This object that we pass here is the same object that we get as a result. So our styles object has a property called container, which is an object itself. This is the reason why we can reference styles.container over here. So whatever we pass to the create method, we get it as a result. Now you might ask, but what is the purpose of this method? Why can't we just use a plain JavaScript object? Why do we have to call stylesheet.create? Well, there are two reasons. The first reason is that this method validates the properties that we use here. So it ensures that we don't accidentally misspell a property. So if we misspell this property, let's say we add an E at the end, look what happens. We get this red box. Background color with an E is not a valid style property. This validation doesn't happen if we use a plain JavaScript object directly. So let me revert this back. Now, let's pass an inline object and set its background, let's misspell it, to something else. Look, we don't get any errors, but our app doesn't have the right look either. So this is one benefit of using stylesheet.create. Let me remove this. So styles.container. So this method validates the properties that we pass here. The second benefit is that the React Native team have been working on implementing some kind of optimizations behind the scene. As far as I know, these optimizations are not available at the time of recording this, but they're coming in the future. So it's the recommended practice to use the Stylesheet API to define styles. So this is all about the Stylesheet API. Now, here we can also combine multiple style objects. So instead of passing a single object, we can pass an array of objects. So in this array, first we have styles.container, and then we can add a second object, like this object that we define over here. Now, take a look. The result is the combination of these two style objects, kind of similar to how we can apply multiple CSS classes to an HTML element. But here, the results are more predictable. So the object on the right overwrites the properties of the object on the left. In this case, container style is defining a single property, that's background color. So this is overwriting the background color that we defined earlier. So the results are more predictable. Now, another question you might have is, do we have to put these styles in the same file? Not really. You can extract this from here, put it in a separate file, and then import it in this file. That's totally fine. But it's very conventional to define the styles below a component because quite often you need to work with both the structure of your component as well as the styles in the same section. If you put the styles in a separate file, you have to constantly go back and forth between two files. I personally, even though I'm all about writing clean code and separation of concerns, I prefer to have the styles below my components. It has worked better for me, but if you don't like it, that's totally fine. You can separate your styles. In the next section, we're going to talk about styles in detail. For now, that's all you need to know about styles.